Listen, I know someone says it every year, but 2024 has been truly a remarkable year in pop music, and we are halfway through. I mean, we've had albums from Beyonce and Taylor and Billie Eilish. Chapel Roan and Charlie XCX own the summer. There's a lot to talk about. The group chat is here. Let's go. I'm Alamin Abdul Mahmoud. This is Commotion. Okay, so we're just a little more than halfway through 2024. Let me tell you, just like as someone who follows pop music pretty closely, you don't get years like this one. You do not get years with so many big album releases, but also so many artists breaking through in ways that are really surprising. And then also just so many diss tracks. So there's a lot to talk about there. The group chat is here. We're going to get into the biggest stories in music of 2024. Suzy Exposito is here. Rosie Long Decter is here. And Carl Wilson is here. What's up, y'all? Welcome to the show.
Hey.
Good morning.
Hello. Listen, Rosie, I'm going to start with you on this one. What's been your biggest takeaway from the year in music so far?
Yeah, I'm thinking of it as kind of like a pop reloaded moment. Like I had a note in my phone to myself from this time last year that said, "Why is pop so boring right now?" and I can't say that anymore, and that feels great. For me, the most exciting story of the year has been Chapel Roan. I think she's bringing this fresh, gay as hell, campy energy to the charts, and I'm loving it. It feels great. And I think in general, what's working for a lot of pop stars right now is a kind of playfulness, a kind of like they're having fun. You can feel them having fun.
Yeah.
You can feel Charlie having fun, Charlie XCX, Billie Eilish's Lunch. There's a lot of kind of looseness going on. And I think that is feeling really good. And it's an exciting moment, I would say.
Yeah, like for a while, pop music was kind of very miserable and very self-serious, and we are not in that place right now. I want to give people an idea of the energy that you're talking about, Rosie. So let's just hear a bit of Chapel Roan. Here's Good Luck, Babe. Carl, what are you feeling? Are you feeling the energy shift that Rosie's talking about there?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I've been sort of complaining about the downbeat tone of pop for years now, and really, especially since the pandemic, it felt like, maybe it would never recover. And then all of a sudden, since this winter, it's not just all the big albums that have come out from recognized names. It's, people who are showing up on the charts like Chapel Roan, Sabrina Carpenter, who was not a thing, to most people a year ago, is now vying with herself for Song of the Summer on the charts. People like Tommy Richmond with $1 Million Baby, which has been a huge song this summer, which we may never hear of Tommy Richmond again. I don't really know who Tommy Richmond is, but that's fun. That's exciting on the charts to just have that sense of, oh, there's action, there's commotion, to coin a phrase.
Yeah, no, there truly is. You know what? We can't have this conversation about this year in music without hearing a little bit of Sabrina Carpenter. So let's just hear a bit of Espresso.
Now he's thinking about me every night. Oh, isn't that sweet? I guess so. So you can't sleep, baby, I know. Does that mean espresso? Put it up, down.
Okay, Suzy, I do the same thing every time this song comes on. And this song comes out in my house about 50 times a day because there's something about the Spotify algorithm that said, whatever song you play, we're going to play Espresso next. It has kind of had this slow climb to number 2, and then it held in number 2 for a while. And then Sabrina Carpenter replaced herself. She was at number 1 with Please, 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 and then she became number 1 again with Espresso, and now Please, Please, Please is number 2. Does it surprise you at all that Sabrina Carpenter went from not really being a thing to being one of the biggest things of this summer, Suzy?
It's not that surprising to me. She has opened for Taylor Swift on the Eras tour.
Yes.
I think that gave her a huge boost. I still don't understand why, when I'm playing like Dark Wave on streaming, why I get Espresso after that. I'm like, excuse you, I am a goth. But I mean, I don't mind. I like Espresso.
Yeah.
I love a campy disco moment. I think the camp queens are doing really well, whether it's Chappell Roan or Sabrina Carpenter. And I think that it's been such a good year for women on the charts that you don't even really have to talk about Taylor Swift because she's not the only woman commercially performing really well right now. However, she will try. She will try to be.
And she will try, and we will talk about Taylor Swift because, Suzy, we got a job to do, okay? And that means including covering the entirety of the year music. So let's just hear a bit of Taylor Swift.
And for a fortnight there we were, forever running to you. Sometimes ask about whoever, now you're in my backyard, turn into
Rosie, I'm interested in this song. This is Fortnight by Taylor Swift from the Tortured Poets Society, which has now spent 10 weeks at number 1. This album that broke all sorts of streaming and chart records, it's faced a bit more of a polarized reaction. But to me, it's a kind of, it's not the Taylor that we expected. It's just slightly adjacent to that Taylor. I think, she's a bit more angry. She's a bit more, let's say, disheveled on this album than she would normally allow herself to be. I'm interested in that version of Taylor Swift. Does this feel like the album of the year to you, Rosie?
For me, I have to say, just in my personal opinion, like this album, it did feel familiar to me. It felt, I hear what you mean about she's a bit more disheveled, she's a bit older, a bit wearier perhaps, but I felt sonically like it was familiar. I felt lyrically like we were treading in a lot of the same territory. And I have to say, like, in what I've seen, at least, I haven't seen it had a lasting impact on the cultural conversation. I don't see people in my circles or online sort of talking about these songs. Aside from the Swifties, who I respect and revere because I'm afraid of them. Deeply afraid and deeply respecting. Let me emphasize.
Mostly afraid, but some respect
afraid.
there too. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But this album to me felt just a little flat in comparison to some of those other campier artists that we're talking about. It didn't quite hit in that zone in the same way.
Carl, I gotta say, it is probably the most polarizing Taylor Swift album in some time. And I think like the idea of Taylor finding herself in a position where she puts out a polarizing work, that should not go unremarked upon, because like, that is, I think, a big deal. Like, she's kind of been a consensus artist for some time. The idea that she would put out a couple of records back to back that are a bit divisive, I think that gets obscured because she's on the biggest tour of all time, and she will continue to be on the biggest tour of all time until the end of the year. But are you surprised by the polarized reaction that the Tortured Poets Society got?
No, not at all. I mean, I felt that way about the album when it came out, and it's a 30-track album. Yeah. And Taylor, Taylor having been ubiquitous for the past year and a half, at least, was asking a lot and demanding a lot. But, to say she hasn't been central to the conversation, it's been the number 1 album ever since it came out. Yeah. It's, if England could barely hold an election this summer because it was too busy having Taylor Swift come to town. So, I think that as much as we might question some things, lots of parts of this album stand up. And also Taylor's been the one kind of keeping things going until this kind of burst of energy happened. That's true. The past few months, for a while there, it was like nobody but Taylor in the pop story. So, she's been bringing people along behind her, I think.
Also, I should say, I've called it the Tortured Poets Society several times, and no one's corrected me. It is a Tortured Poets department, but I appreciate that. It is just kind of Dead Poets Society, Tortured Poets department. They've all just kind of blended each other, and I think we've all kind of come to accept this. Okay, I want to talk about another album from an A-list pop star that arrived with this massive tidal wave of hype.
16 carriages driving away while I watch them ride with my dreams away to the summer sunset.
That is Beyonce. That is from the album Cowboy Carter. Listen, this is an album, Rosie, that debuted at #1. It was celebrated as this like massive game-changing record that engages with the blackness with blackness of country music. But as of this week, this album has dropped to #50. And I think that's interesting because other albums that came out around the same time are still hovering around the top 10. Like Ariana Grande has not fallen out of the top 10, and that album came out before Cowboy Carter. So when you kind of like look at the reception of Cowboy Carter and the longevity, are you surprised by the fact that it's kind of dropped so far down the charts, Rosie?
I'm a little bit surprised. I think it's maybe not a singles album. You know, I think some of the biggest conversations that were happening around it were around Jolene, which I think is one of the weaker moments in the album. You know, I find myself still returning to it, especially the back half and especially those last kind of 5 or 6 songs where she gets a little dancier with it, she gets a little poppier with it, and kind of links it back to Renaissance. And I think there's really, really strong moments in this record. But I wonder if, you know, if we are having this moment where people are getting maybe a little more excited about kind of supporting newer artists having those breakthrough moments than the kind of pop juggernauts that we're used to, it can feel like a little bit familiar. It can feel a little bit like dominance and yeah, so maybe that's what's going on. But for me, not to pit women against each other, we love all women, but Cowboy Carter is like the legacy pop album of the year for me.
Suzy, I am a little bit surprised by how far it has fallen down, but also just like as a tip for people who are listening to this album, who are trying to get into Cowboy Carter now, this many months later, like don't start at track 1. Don't do it. Like the place you want to start is like track 11 and onwards. You know, like start with Daughter. Start with the song that incorporates that opera stuff, and then then go from there, because like that's where Beyonce gets really inventive. So are you surprised by how far it has fallen down the charts?
I'm only surprised because it's Beyonce, but this iteration of Beyonce is actually, you know, it's her taking a radical swing, delving into country music, which is still, it's polarizing in the US, even as it's like extremely pop in the US. Country music is pop, it's popular, but still, you know, gets people all like bristly. And I also think that these divas, whether it's Beyonce or Taylor Swift, I think they could use some editing. You know, Cowboy Carter's really long.
Yes.
Like
too long,
you know,
is your feeling.
Tortured Poets, really long. Like we're talking like 27, 30 songs. Ladies, come on.
But that serves a function though, right? So usually like it sort of, it does game the streaming numbers at least a little bit and make sure that you get to #1. Are we not? We're not down with gaming the streaming. We're kind of over that trend.
I'm over it personally. I mean, I like that Beyonce gets experimental in this album. I think there are more surprises here than in Tortured Poets.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, sonically, I just don't think that these songs hit in the same way that they did on Renaissance. And I can still appreciate the gravity of Beyonce's contribution to country music, you know, and getting someone like Linda Martell on board. Yeah. You know, I think getting like Shabusi on board is awesome. Yes. This is a landmark record for Black people in country music and country music in general.
I guess, Carl, we often forget, you know what, we've said on the show several times, but like Beyonce is a conceptual artist. As Rosie said, she's not someone who's like putting out, you know, an album that is like stacked with singles that are, you know, meant to go #1 in quick succession, like a Sabrina Carpenter. She's sort of doing this album is an album unit, you know. Can you think of any other artists who care about the album as a unit as much as Beyonce does right now?
I mean, Taylor does as well, you know, not as successfully this time around, but she thinks in those terms. I mean, these are mature artists at this point, right? Yeah. They're very different than people like 10, 15 years younger than her who are kind of playing the singles game. And, you know, I think that Cowboy Carter is going to have legs in the long term, you know, and, you know, it's still having its impact in Nashville right now. You know, you mentioned Shabuzi, who basically Beyonce just introduced to the world, and that meld of hip hop and R&B and country is a thing that's becoming more and more prevalent in Nashville right now. Yes, and you know, it's definitely Beyonce gave that a huge boost. So I think you know, chart performance aside, I don't think we should underestimate the impact that it had.
Yeah, I think that sometimes you get these albums that are, turning points for genres and turning points for music, but have nothing to do with commercial performance, right? Like there's a before and after Car Wheels on the Gravel Road. And I think there's a before and after, Cowboy Carter. Like this feels like of a piece to me with the way that you sort of talk about music differently because this album exists. Look, we've been talking a lot about the women dominating these charts. There has also been a man. He's been around. He's been hanging around.
Man.
Let's listen to him right now.
Please stay. I want you. I need you. Oh God, don't take these beautiful things that I've got. Please stay.
From Monroe, Washington, that's Benson Boone. That's current top 10 single, Beautiful Things. Rosie, everything I've learned about Benson Boone has been against my will, which is fine. That sometimes, every once in a while, the world conspires to give us an artist and say, you will know this person's name, whether you like it or not. We should say, though, like this kind of music, this sort of like anthemic, folk, soul-influenced music that's been made by Benson Boone, but also Teddy Swims, or like Noah Kahan, even one of the modern torchbearers of the sound, Hosier, he's got a new record, the Too Sweet, which has been like one of my favorite songs of the year. What do you think it is about the sound that has had this like massive resurgence this past year?
Yeah, so I'm calling these my belting boys. These are the belting boys of the moment.
Yes.
And we've got a few in Canada here too. We've got Talk as well. We've got Alexander Stewart, who've been charting. And I think that it's a bit of the folk rock sound that was really popular 10 years ago. It's a bit of Christian rock, but I think it's also got this slightly TikTokified quality to it, where it's really trying to wallop you with as much emotion as possible in a short span, so that if you're scrolling across this, you hear this powerful voice, this intensity of emotion, and you're like, whoa, who's this? And I think it's interesting that, we're talking about these women pop stars who are like playful and sleek and having fun with it. And then the boys are like, I think there's a bit of.
I really appreciated your belting. That was excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
I think there's a bit of vulnerable masculinity going on there, but there's also, I think it's still a little bit of I am man, hear me roar, which will always recur in its own form, But I don't hate it. I think Beautiful Things slaps, and that song was at #1 in Canada, I think, for 9 weeks.
Yeah.
And hasn't hit #1 in the States yet. So clearly something about that is really connecting here.
Yeah, it is a song that like forces itself on you. Like I think like there's something about that song where you go like, I don't know if I like this song, and then by the time you hear it the third or fourth time, A, you know all the parts, and B, like you can't help but like literally physically do the movement, as he's doing that like big shouting, like that belting part. And speaking of belting, I wore my Zach Bryan shirt today for this conversation because Zach Bryan has been belting around, North America. I thank you for doing that cowboy movement, Suzy. I really appreciate it. Yeah, the lasso. He also, Zach Bryan, I cannot believe the amount of output that this man has been able to produce. He just put out another album on the 4th of July. Like, I'm exhausted thinking about how much this man is putting out music, but that is neither here nor there. I should tell folks, if you're just joining us, my name is Alamin Abdulmahmoud. This show is called Commotion, and the group chat today is Suzy Exposito and Rosie Long Decter and Carl Wilson, and we are talking about the year in music. Okay, we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about, the always ever-present competition to be crowned song of the summer. These are the songs you're just going to hear everywhere that you go for the next few months. And they're the ones that, we're going to be listening to years from now and go, oh yeah, that's what the summer of 2024 was like. Rosie, I'm going to start with your pick. Let's hear it.
Someone pour me up a double shot of whiskey. They know me and Jack Daniels got a history. There's a party downtown near 5th Street. Everybody at the bar getting tipsy.
Shabuzi. That song's a jam. That song is called a bar song, Tipsy. Rosie, why is this your song of the summer?
I I'm loving Espresso too, don't get me wrong, but for me, this is the song of the summer because I think summer also is, as much as it's about fun and getting loose, I think it's got a little bit of melancholy to it, and I like that this song has a melancholy to it. You know, it is about having fun, but it's also about like life is hard, and there's a lot of reasons why we need to go out and blow off steam.
Yeah.
And that really hits for me. And yeah, you know, I think we were talking about the influence of Cowboy Carter. I think that Shabuzi's having this huge moment partly because of that feature on that record, and that was how I got introduced to him. And then I heard this song, and I was like, "Oh, this feels like a really kind of vibrant twist on country music, and it's working for me."
There's all kinds of machinery behind when an artist gets to put out an album and a single, and someone gives Shabuzi's team, you know, an award for timing in terms of the release of this song and this album, because they were like, oh, Beyonce's going now, then it's time for us to go. It's time for us to put out our biggest song, and sure enough, that song ends up making it all the way to #1. Okay, in terms of speaking of blowing off steam, Suzy, this was your pick.
Well, honestly, I was speechless when I woke up to your voice. Now you tell me how you've been feeling. Let's work it out on the remix. You'd always say let's go out, but then I'd cancel last minute. I was so lost in my head and scared to be in the pictures. 'Cause for the last couple years.
Come on. I've played this song maybe 1,000,000 times in the last week. Let's work it out on the remix, dude. Let's get into it. Why'd you pick Charlie and Lorde? That is, of course, Lorde and Charlie XCX. And this song has just been so kind of everywhere, and I've really loved everything about it. It's called "Girl Still Confusing." Do you want to talk about why that's your pick?
I do love it when people get vulnerable at the club, and I think that's what Brat really symbolizes for me.
Yeah, Brat, the Charlie XCX album. Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Charlie's new album, it's just about getting messy with your feelings at the club. And the song is beautiful because Charlie and Lorde, they're tackling an issue that arises not just like interpersonally between us mortals, but like when, you know, you have a moment when so many women are duking it out on the charts right now. Yeah. And I know that like girl hate and competition between women is frowned upon and understood as like anti-feminist, but it's inevitable in an industry where you have to compete commercially. That's what the job is. So for Charlie and Lorde to sit with these feelings, Charlie expressing her insecurity over a sick beat, you know, about being compared to Lorde, who in turn is just like, girl, I was spiraling. I wasn't competing with you. Yeah. I was at home with a mental health crisis. That's real. And I really like the therapeutic approach.
Yeah, I like the therapeutic approach too, because there's something about, you know, when Girl So Confusing, the original version came out, there was all this internet speculation, like, who's this song about? And then very quickly, you know, the Charlie XCX subreddit was like, it's about Lorde, okay? And then, like, sure enough, a few days later, we have this remix where they do work it out. And sometimes people do work it out, as opposed to when they don't. Let's hear a song that is entirely about beef.
They not like us, they not like us, they not like us. Once upon a time, all of us was in chains. Homie still double down, calling us some slaves. Atlanta was the mecca, building railroads and trains. Bear with me for a second, let me put y'all on game.
All right, Carl, first of all, I gotta say, Kendrick Lamar on Thursday puts out the video for Not Like Us. This man is powered by hate. This man hates Drake so much, it is making him age backwards. It's absolutely just incredible to me. And so what do you think it is about this song, but Not Like Us, that has kind of given it this longevity? Because its moment has lasted for quite a while at this point.
I mean, partly it's just that for a dense, unpleasant diss track, it has hooks, right? It really, it slaps. Yeah. But I think the other thing is like it really that beef, although it was kind of ugly to witness and problematic on a bunch of levels, it was a moment, and it'll be something that we remember about this year in music. And this song has kind of stood for the fact that we went through as a pop audience kind of a collective experience. And I think there's something deeper too, that hip hop is kind of at a crossroads right now. Yeah. I think, after being dominant for 20 years, it's kind of unclear where it's going next. And these are the people, kind of two of the biggest figures of the past phase of hip hop, kind of wrestling with what rap is all about. You know, this song
100%.
is really about who's in the community, what are our values, what matters, who's vouching for you. And the video, you know, doubles down on that.
Oh yeah.
Kendrick surrounded by the community, you know, so I think there's a lot going on
Carl,
in this, as odd a summer song as it is.
I got to leave it there because we literally have 15 seconds left. So I just got to say, Carl and Suzy and Rosie, I really appreciate your time. This has been a delight. Thank you for talking about the songs of the summer and the year in music. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Alamin. This is Commotion. See you tomorrow.